who give with open hands and hearts that do what's fair. Can you see the blessings fall on believers one and all, who take the time to give and know it's right to care? Give a little of yourself, cure your greed, purify your wealth. Look around at where you live.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. In the name of Allah, the most beneficent, the most merciful. It's 8:20 on a Tuesday evening, which means it's time for the Business Matters show. And usually I'll have the pleasure and honor of introducing my dad at this point in the show, but fortunately it's my parents' 30th wedding anniversary, so happy anniversary to my parents. They're on holiday at the moment, so if they're streaming and listening, happy anniversary to you guys. May the Almighty bless you guys with many, many happy returns, inshallah. And to all the listeners, remember them in your du'as. Getting on with tonight's show, extremely interesting and fascinating mind-blowing guests in the studio this evening. And I'm pretty sure they're going to give us some information which we did not know before. The topic for tonight's National Wills Week. National Wills Week is actually next week, but National Wills Week is an initiative of the legal profession. It runs from the 26th to the 30th of October 2020, and the public is given free advice and assisted in drawing a simple will. Money Matters or Business Matters supports Will Week, not only because of the Sharia obligation to have an Islamic will, but as an essential part of the financial planning process. Al Baraka Bank and Amal, which is the Association of Muslim Accountants and Lawyers, have partnered this year to give free advice to the public. Which brings us to our guest tonight. Firstly, Maulana Safwan Navlaki, who is a Sharia advisor at Al Baraka Bank. Assalamu alaikum, Maulana.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you for taking time off your Tuesday evening and joining us. And from Amal, we have two really well-known attorneys from the community. Firstly, the senior attorney, Mr. Aslam Mayat, who is an ex-co of Amal. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam, and to you and the listeners.
No introduction needed. You're a well-known, well-represented personality on Radio Al Ansar. Thank you for taking the time out this Tuesday evening and joining us in studio. And not so senior, but up and coming, really someone who is making strides in the community from the charitable perspective and in her career. Assalamu alaikum, Fatima Lakat.
Wa alaikum salam. Thank you for having me.
And thanks for being here, actually. Aslam, firstly, just a little dig. You know, being an initiative of lawyers and you guys giving free advice. I mean, what's the catch? Lawyers normally charge for everything.
Imran, your clients have enough mullah. Look, I'm actually glad you asked that question. There's no catch. Charity and service to the community is part of religion. Amal takes this responsibility seriously. Pre-COVID, Amal each year had 4 free outreach legal clinics, including at Kwamashu. Amal is involved in getting corporate governance and tax compliance with our PBOs and NGOs. Amal assists Sanha, Sahok, and various other organizations. It's just a few examples. And our bankster partner Al Baraka is no slouch with regard to charity and social responsibility. The Zondo Bucks Foundation, which funds a rural school, is just but one example.
Absolutely. I mean, Al Baraka really stepped up during COVID and as well as out of COVID times. They really stepped up during COVID times and as well as out of COVID. So big ups and kudos to Al Baraka Bank for all the corporate social responsibility and charitable work that they do for our community. Aslam, if a person does not have a will, does the state get his assets?
No, look, your states do not get your assets. Fortunately, otherwise, like everything else, it will be looted. Instead, in the absence of a valid will, your estate devolves to your immediate family in terms of the Interstate Succession Act. your spouse or spouses inherit 250,000 rand each, or a child share, whichever is the greater, and the balance is divided equally amongst the children. So if you have no spouse or descendants, your estate goes to your parents, and failing your parents, to your siblings. So in short, if you've got no spouse or descendants, it goes up to your parents and then downwards from there.
Okay, quite concise. Fatima, you want to add in a little bit about the spouses?
Yes, so in this context, spouses will include Islamic nikah spouses as well. So to give you an example, if a man has a net estate of 1 million rand and he has 4 wives and say 8 children, then each of the 4 wives will get the minimum 250,000 rand and each of the child won't get anything. However, if he had 1 wife and 3 children, then each of them will get an equal 250,000 rand. That, of course, is in terms of the Interstate Succession Act.
Wow, that's a large family. Mulana, in terms of the South African interstate succession, it goes a bit against Islamic law. If you want your estate to devolve according to Sharia, then is it necessary to state that in your will?
Yes, that is correct. You need to state in your will that you'd like and you bequeath that your estate be distributed in accordance with the Islamic law of succession. And I'd just like to elaborate a bit regarding the importance of the Islamic law of succession. If we study the verses of the Holy Quran where Allah mentions and states and outlines the laws of Islamic inheritance, at the end Allah Ta'ala ends by saying that these are the limits set by Allah, and promises reward for and Jannah for the person who implements it, and the fire of hell for the person who fails to implement these laws. So this outlines and explains the importance thereof. In a hadith narrated by the Holy Prophet ﷺ, he says that it is the duty of a Muslim who has anything to bequeath not to let 2 nights pass without writing a will about it. So we understand from here that it is imperative, it is fundamental, it is one of the compulsory acts of Islam for us to ensure that our estate is distributed in accordance with Islamic law. And it would follow then for us to ensure that we have an Islamic will, as we just heard from our attorneys. The Interstate Succession Act is completely against the Islamic laws of inheritance, and therefore it would be compulsory too for us to ensure that we have an Islamic will.
Thank you. Mulana, following up on that, a bit of a topical question. If someone approaches a Mulana or a Muslim lawyer to create a will, and it's not in compliance with Sharia, what is the Islamic permissibility of that?
There are numerous principles that I'd like to share with our listeners in this regard very, very quickly. The first is what is explained in Surah Al-Asr, which we all know. Allah says, وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ. Allah commands us to encourage each other on truth and on righteousness. So as Muslim professionals and practitioners, it is our duty to advise our clients to do the right thing in this regard. The second is that we should desist from assisting each other in acts of disobedience. Allah says in Surah Ma'idah, وَلَا تَعَاوَنُوا عَلَى الْإِثْمِ وَالْعُدْوَانِ. Do not assist each other in disobeying Allah. So for us as practitioners, again, to assist our clients in drawing up such agreements or wills which are not in compliance with Sharia, again, we will be assisting them in disobedience. And this also has implications in terms of the halal or permissible nature of the income we earn from delivering that particular service. The third aspect that I'd like to encourage our legal fraternity to keep in mind is when we are servicing our clients in any matter that may have Islamic and Sharia implications, then you should consult with the relevant experts if you are unsure. For example, an attorney is not going to go and give tax advice where he does not have the specialization and knowledge regarding taxation. We should apply the same ethical principles when Sharia matters arise.
Fascinating. Aslam, what are the formalities regarding the signing of a will?
Yeah, look, this is actually an important matter, although it sounds mundane. especially if people buy a will from, pull it off the net and just sign a will. I'll keep it simple. A testator has to be 16 years or older. For a will to be accepted by the master as valid, each page of the will has to be signed at the end by the testator and 2 witnesses in the presence of each other. So after you've signed the will, you can't just take it to your neighbor and say, shove 2 signatures on. The witnesses do not need to know what your will states, but each of you needs to be seen signing the will. An heir or his spouse must not witness a will, as it may result in the heir being either partially or wholly disqualified from inheriting. And these same rules apply to executors as well, because executors also benefit from, they're entitled to charge up to 3.5% of the assets. So that applies to them as well. They benefit from the will.
Okay. And Fatima, if so much goes into creating a will, and why would a person need expert advice if the standard Islamic will serves the purpose?
That's a really good question, Imran. So while the standard will may cover most people and most scenarios, one size does not fit all in this case. For example, the general rule is that orphan grandchildren do not inherit if they are living sons. Once this is explained to people, every one of our clients have opted to provide for their orphan grandchildren in the case of such an eventuality. This can be done from your 1/3 of your net estate as a wasiya. The remaining balance then goes to the Islamic heirs in the prescribed portions. So I would strongly recommend that good advice is taken before signing a will, and those that have substantial assets should consider doing a full financial planning exercises, probably with yourself and with a lawyer or an accountant.
This is not scripted, by the way. Maulana, turning to you, Fatima mentioned something very interesting about 1/3 and wasiya. Can you tell us a little bit about that, and what can the 1/3 and wasiya be used for?
Islamic law basically allows a limited freedom of testation, which means that we can only freely decide what happens with up to 1/3 of our estate. So this 1/3 can be used for a variety of things. Some things that it can be used for is for fidya, for recompense for outstanding religious obligations such as outstanding salah, outstanding fast, which a person failed to keep during their lifetime. It can also be utilized for charitable projects, to establish a waqf, for example, or other charitable deeds. We could also specify in our will that it should go towards certain sadaqah jariyah projects, such as digging a borehole, establishing a masjid, etc. And as Fatima also explained now, that if you can also specify certain relatives who are not going to inherit in the ordinary course of the distribution, for them to also benefit, you could specify them from this wasiya portion.
If I could just add to that,
Sure.
a lot of these days you're finding, you might want to provide for servant employees.
Yes.
You might want to caregivers who've looked after you. So
The 1/3 portion can be used for...
as Maulana said, up to 1/3.
Up to 1/3.
Up to 1/3. These are amongst the things.
So from a law perspective, when someone passes away, they're not exactly sure how much is going to be left. So would you recommend leaving that in percentage terms or actual amounts?
Well, if you know exactly what your things are, you can specify specific amounts. But if those amounts in aggregate exceed 1/3, then it would stop there.
I see.
So sometimes what you say is that if these in aggregate exceed that, then they will all abate proportion, in the same proportion downwards. I think Maulana mentioned about giving for charity and
Yes.
other religious maybe for a mosque or something like that. Of course, as he'll tell you, that's sawab-e-jariyah. But from a legal point of view, bequests to charities are exempt. If you give it to a PBO, rather,
Right.
that would be exempt from estate duty.
Okay,
So
fantastic. So that's one way of saving on the estate duty. Maulana, staying with you, previously I know it was cultural that adoption of children happened within the family. These days we see a lot of adoptions which are outside of the family and also from other religions. So if a child was adopted from a non-Muslim family and he dies before he marries and he has children, then to whom does his estate devolve?
We would assume that if a child is adopted by a Muslim family, then that child would be brought up according to Islam and will be brought up as a Muslim. So if this is the case, that the child is brought up as a Muslim, wasiyah can be made in their favor, irrespective of who the biological family is, whether they're Muslim or non-Muslim. And wasiyah, in fact, can also be made to non-Muslims. So if you would like to, reward your domestic worker, for example, who is a non-Muslim, this it can be done from the 1/3 portion.
Sorry, Maulana, if you could just, going back to the from the 1/3, adopted children, if you could just elaborate on that.
So adopted children do not inherit ordinarily, as in terms of the Islamic laws of inheritance, because they do not have a biological link with the adopted parent. So in order to provide for them and to ensure that they also benefit, because they are growing up in your care and they would be financially dependent on you to an extent, it would be fair and it would be something that is virtuous to provide for them in terms of the wasiyah.
And that would come out from the 1/3 portion.
Yes, that's right.
All right. I must say, really interesting conversation thus far, but we have to take a little break and listen to some adverts, but we'll be back shortly.
Radio Al Ansar, 24/7, 365.
Visit the Al Ansar shop for a new range of imported books and games for your little ones. Al Ansar shop, your one-stop Islamic shop.
There are over 200 million orphans globally. We can't help all of them. But what if we each helped just one? The Al Imdad Foundation now gives you an opportunity to help just one orphan from Syria or Palestine. For just 500 Rand per month, you can help safeguard the dignity of an orphan by assisting them with basic needs such as food, clothing, shelter, medical care, and attention. Our orphan sponsorship program allows you to track the progress of your orphan through regular feedback. Make a difference in the life of an orphan today. Visit alimdad.com or call 0861 786 243 for more information.
One of the best forms of charity is to feed the hungry. The Al Ansar Outreach and Radio Al Ansar will be treating less fortunate kids from schools, creches and informal settlements by launching our first burger drive. Start this Muharram by bringing joy to a child during these trying times by treating them with a scrumptious burger and a fruit for only 10 Rand. For further information and banking details, please contact the Outreach Department on 031 208 1601.
The Al Ansar Foundation reaches millions of people across the globe with the aim of sustaining our commitment toward educating, uniting, informing, and uplifting the community. Please visit www.alansar.co.za to find out how you can make a difference by contributing your zakat and lilar to the Al Ansar Foundation's steadfast projects.
The noble character of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the ultimate role model.
The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was the most dignified, well-mannered, and noble of people.
Audio stream across the world on radioalansar.co.za.
Give a little of yourself. Cure your greed. Purify your wealth. Look around at where you live. Look at all
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It's the Business Matters Show, and if you've just joined us, we're talking about Islamic worlds. We have in studio 3 fascinating guests, a combination of people from Amal and Al Baraka Bank. Before we left off for an ad break, we were talking about the 1/3 portion in the world and what that can be used for. Taking us to our next question, Aslam, let's talk about the 2/3 portion of a will. That's more of your net estate that has to go to your Islamic heirs. Can you explain the devotion of an estate of a husband who leaves behind both parents, a wife, a daughter, and a son? How would the 2/3 portion work out in a case like that?
As Maulana explained, the 2/3 you've got no discretion over. It will go according to the prescribed proportions depending on who you left behind. In the stated case that you mentioned, the father would get, and I'm just giving you approximations and percentages.
We won't hold you to this.
Well, for simplicity, I don't want to go into fractions. Father will get 17%, mother 17%, wife 12.5%, one son 36%, and one daughter, half of that, 18%.
Okay. Mulana, how come the mother and the father get the same and females only get a half of the males? I mean, a lot of people out there in today's times will say that's extremely sexist.
Yes. So as you see here, the mother and father are getting the same amount, which is 17%. If we study the Islamic laws of succession, we will find that males are only entitled to double the share of a female in certain instances, such as where there's a son and daughter, brother and sister together. There are numerous other instances where females inherit the same as a male in the example which we just heard now, and other instances where females inherit more than the male heirs, and some other instances where the female inherits and the male does not inherit at all. So it's not a blanket rule, as some people believe it to be due to misinformation, etc. In as far as our belief and our mindset and attitude goes, our belief in the absolute and ultimate justice of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and in the laws of the Quran, this should never sway. However, it should not stop us from seeking to understand and reflect why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala design this particular system of inheritance in this particular way, as long as this does not lead to doubt. And in the event that we cannot perceive the justice in something, we should resign that to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as our limited minds can never fathom the deep wisdom of Allah, who is Al-Hakim, the All-Wise.
If I could just add
sure.
to that, the verse of Surah Nisa is been put up on the faculty of law at Harvard University, which they describe as one of the greatest expressions of justice in history. So Islam is based on justice. Now, freedom of testation is one extreme. You could leave everything to the cat's home and nothing to your family. Interstate Succession Act is actually another rigid extreme. It goes according to set proportions. Islam is a flexible middle path. You have your parents, your spouse, your children, other relatives are protected. And yet you've got the 1/3 to be able to give to other people as well. So it's actually a combination of both. It's flexible, it does both. It's really the other two extremes can have serious problems, and this is where the 1/3 allows you to ameliorate things.
Absolutely. If we look at the Almighty's wisdom, I'm sure we will come to some sort of reasoning and for why it was prescribed in the way it did. Quite fascinating that you mentioned a verse from the Quran in Harvard University. By any chance you have that verse offhand? Or the
it's from Surah Nisa.
Surah Nisa verse?
Well, basically what it says is that if you're giving testimony, it doesn't matter whether it's against your parents, whoever it is, even the closest to you, you have to give truthful testimony because Allah is all-knowing.
Subhanallah. Fantastic. Absolute testament to our faith that something from the Quran is up in Harvard University. Mulana, this is also a bit of a topical one. Can you explain divine justice? Why in certain instances a male inherits double the share of his female counterpart, especially considering that we live in a non-Muslim country without the support net of the Baytul Mal, which was previously there in the Prophet's time, and in this modern age of females working inside or outside of home to support the family. And in some instances, you would say that the wife actually earns more than the male. You can call her the breadwinner.
This is a very important question. Thank you for bringing it up. We need to understand the broader economic model and the system of Islamic inheritance. If we analyze and just reflect on the Islamic inheritance system, we will find that there are three factors that are at play that determine who inherits and how much they inherit. The first factor is the closeness of a relative. So you'll find that the closer the relative to the deceased, the more they will inherit, or they will inherit in exception to others. The second is a generational position. So you will find that children would inherit more than their parents because parents are now reaching the end of their lives. They don't require that much of a financial boost from the inheritance, whereas children are the opposite. And the last factor that we see at play is the financial responsibility of the heir. In terms of the Islamic financial system and the Islamic economic model, females are not required to earn to spend on themselves or their dependents or their children. Whatever they do spend, if they earn and they possess wealth, is something that is done gratuitously. And the burden of providing income for both females and minors and all those that are vulnerable is on the male. So if we just reflect on this, we'll find that the male who has all the financial responsibility, he is inheriting a portion which is double that of the female, whereas she is also inheriting a significant portion, but without any of that financial responsibility that the male has. And if you truly reflect on the net outcome of this, it will definitely be in favoring women. So given the larger system of the financial responsibilities, the distribution of wealth aims to equalize all recipients. And coming to the second part of your question, which deals with the modern age, and we find that we don't have a Baytul Mal, etc., Islamic law has the capacity to cater for unique circumstances. So you may find that a father sees his daughter who is perhaps divorced, and she doesn't have that much financial security, and she has minor children that she needs to take care of, whereas his son is not. He's better positioned in terms of his finances. So this father can gift certain assets to his daughter during his lifetime, to ensure that she has that particular financial security. So it is not like a rigid system where everybody gets what they're entitled to and the woman is left neglected.
But just to clarify, that has to be given to the daughter during the parent's lifetime.
Yes, that is correct.
Can't be stipulated in a will for after death.
Absolutely. So there are many scholars who permit including the heirs in the wasiya portion, but important to note that this particular application is subject to the agreement of the other heirs. So if a daughter is stipulated in the wasiya and the remaining heirs do not accept it, then that wasiya will be null and void.
Interesting. Aslam, if a person dies without leaving a will, or leaves an will which is in contradiction to Sharia, is there any recourse for the family to rectify this, or is it now binding and they have to go along with it?
No, they can sort it out. One must avoid renunciation or repudiation. What the heirs can do, they can conclude a redistribution agreement.
But all heirs have to be in agreement.
All would have to agree.
If a single disagrees, then will stands.
Well, the others can agree amongst themselves, but basically they'd all have to agree before.
Okay.
Right. Now, such an agreement, a redistribution agreement, has legal pitfalls. So get it done by a lawyer, and to avoid leaving the problem to the heirs, make an Islamic will.
I suppose no one wants to see their family fight after they pass away.
Absolutely,
it's a bit of a sore one. Mulana, where a husband passes away, leaving the wife, both parents, an 8-year-old daughter, who is obliged to take care of that daughter?
The first person to be financially responsible for that daughter would be the paternal grandfather.
And if there's no grandfather, or rather if he's not financially stable?
The next closest male relative, such as the father's brother, etc., although it is important to note that the jurists of the different madhahib have differed in respect of to which extent or upon which relatives will maintenance be compulsory. That being said, as the broader Muslim community and as neighbors in our societies, we have an obligation to assist and take care of the vulnerable members of the community. So it is very important for us to create waqf funds and other sort of initiatives to ensure that these people are protected.
Absolutely. It's fascinating to see how Islam has thought about all of these circumstances and put in place measures for us to help those less fortunate. Aslam, a question that always comes up when talking about wills. A couple has a home, and I don't know why, but in our community, the wives always predict that the husbands are going to die first.
Inshallah.
I don't know if I say. But if a husband passes away first, how can the couple secure a roof over the wife's head or mother's head up until the time that she has to pass on?
Yeah. Look, this is a common concern. You always worry about this thing, having a widow until her death. And he could often fear that the 1/8 is not sufficient for her requirements. So, if you leave the house and it goes to all the heirs in terms of their shares, the fear could be that the heirs could say, look, we want to sell the house. And in terms of South African law, the house would get sold. There's 3 possible solutions. The first is you could gift the house to your wife during your lifetime. Right? There are dangers in this.
She could kick you out.
Yes. There's a distinct danger that she could kick you out, especially if there was a divorce or you took a second wife. If you gift it to her, now she dies, it goes to her heirs, which could even include her parents or maybe children from her first marriage, and then you definitely would be kicked out. So that's one solution. The other solution is you could donate the bedroom and its contents to the wife during your lifetime, right?
Okay.
So this is now looking more at the Islamic aspect of it. So she's now the owner of that room and the contents. So when you die, the heirs would own the rest of it in terms, including herself in terms of the Islamic proportions, but she'd own that. Again, there's a problem with this because the heirs could rent the rest of the house out to somebody else. So it's
complicated.
It's not something I would ever advise. The best option is during your lifetime to give your wife a lease or usufruct until her death. So on your death, the house is transferred to your heirs in terms of the Islamic shares, but they are bound by the lease or usufruct. Now, I think people need to listen carefully. As my ex-president said, some mazhabs, such as Maliki, regard a lease or usufruct, which the Malikis term as umrah. Now, a usufruct is the right to the use of the asset, not the ownership of the asset. Now, they regard that as valid and binding even after the death of the owner, but not Hanafi mazhab.
Okay.
So what I discussed here the lease or usufruct would not survive the death of the owner. So, in terms of Hanafi mazhab, it does not apply. Right? But I'm just making you aware of the valid possibilities in terms of Islamic law. For something as complicated as this, person needs to go to their mufti advisor and take,
as well as their lawyer.
Yes, but this type of thing is an Islamic question.
More of
now,
an Islamic question.
If your mufti says, "Look, I'm Hanafi, and it shouldn't be. You Hanafi, you shouldn't do it." That's up to you. You go and seek your own advice from your own mufti advisor and take the advice. It's valid in terms of you got four mazhabs. It is valid in terms of Islamic law, but not all the mazhabs agree with it. So you need to be careful. Instead of just listening to this and going and doing something and finding that you're uncomfortable with it later on.
And I think that's one of the reasons that Al Baraka and Amal have partnered in this National Wills Week. It's to guide the community as to drawing up their wills and
the possibilities.
Correct.
The eventual choice is up to them. I don't know if Maulana wants to add anything to that.
I think you're absolutely correct there. It's imperative when applying such principles to seek the right advice and to do it in consultation with the relevant experts and the muftis to ensure that we are not breaching any laws in the process. And just to keep in mind that such things should not be done with the intention to prejudice any heirs. Yes, we are allowed to take certain steps to safeguard and protect the future of certain vulnerable members of females, etc. But it should not be done with the intention to prejudice other heirs, because this will then have negative implications for the testator.
Mulana, and maybe Aslam, if you want to jump into this next question, what if a person leaves a wife and only daughters, no sons? What happens in a case like that? Because it's very common in our community these days.
Yeah, this is also another thing that does cause people concerns. In the case of leaving a wife and daughters only, your siblings also inherit. Now, what I'm about to tell you, I think, has to be looked at in the light of what Maulana just said, that if your family is in need and you feel you need to provide for them, there may be a Islamically valid reason to depart from the normal situations. So it's not just you want to prejudice your heirs and deprive them, but there is an actual need. So in this case, if you felt that there was a need to provide for your wife and daughters, then فَبِأَيِّ آلَاءِ رَبِّكُمَا تُكَذِّبَانِ, Allah has given you akal, and you've got a right and duty to use this bounty. Now, you could, and as I said, these are possibilities. These type of things, you need proper mufti advice, but I'm just telling you what the possibilities are. You could, in your lifetime, create a waqf or trust in perpetuity. The beneficiaries of the trust can be yourself till you die, after you die your wife, after your wife your daughters, your grandchildren, and so on down the generations. But the ultimate beneficiary has to be a charity. So the capital cannot be used.
I see.
Capital belongs to charity, and at some stage it has to go to charity. Right?
Fantastic method to create sustainability.
The beneficiaries have the full usage but cannot draw on the capital. As I said, this needs expert advice, and if it is done, it has to be done during your lifetime. Once you die, it doesn't belong to you anymore.
Yeah. I think one of the fundamentals of Islamic wills is you cannot control from the grave. So many questions, but we're almost reaching the end of our show. The last question to Maulana or Aslam. A aging parent who has a son or daughter who has taken care of them in their old age, and they want to give all their assets to this one individual, and just say there were two heirs in the scenario. Is it permissible to do something like that during your lifetime and transfer all your assets to one heir?
Monana, you want to...
From a Sharia perspective and from a legal perspective.
Sorry, can you just repeat that question?
Okay.
So there's a aging parent who has a son or daughter, whatever. Just say there's a son and a daughter. One of them takes care of the parent, and the parent wants to give all their assets to the one heir during their lifetime. From a Sharia perspective and from a legal perspective, what is the consequence?
Look, from a Sharia perspective, a person has full mandate and jurisdiction over their wealth during their lifetime, provided that it is not their terminal illness. So once they are in their terminal illness, then their control and their mandate already reduces. For example, wasiya cannot be made during that time of terminal illness. A person cannot give gifts during that terminal illness, especially to heirs, etc. So, provided that it's not during the time of terminal illness, the testator and the person does have jurisdiction over their wealth. But again, coming back to my initial point regarding the intention, if you feel, that the certain son neglected me and therefore he is not entitled to, he doesn't deserve a portion of my wealth, this is the wrong attitude to have, and we shouldn't do it on this basis. Yes, if you want to favor a certain child because they are less financially stable or because they've served you extra, then you can do that during your lifetime. But obviously keeping in mind that the intention should never be to, cancel out another heir.
Yeah, from a legal perspective?
Yeah, just to get the Sharia thing, if somebody's taken care of you in your thing, and you wanted to give them something, that's fine. But, where you said give everything, it might be going a bit too far. From a legal point of view, see, if you donated something during your lifetime, you'd pay donations tax and you'd pay transfer duty.
Okay.
Right. If it came through your will, you exempt from both those duties.
Okay.
So there's nothing wrong with making the Islamic niyat, and you can record it in writing. There's nothing illegal either from a South African law point of view or a Islamic point of view to say, look, I'm making the niyat, this house now belongs to you, right? But in your will you say, look, I'm transferring this, I had made the intention, but now in my will I'm bequeathing it to things. So to cover the South African point of view, so you don't pay transfer duty and estate duty. But what you must understand is if tomorrow the son says, look, I want to take transfer into my own name, or I want to sell it, or I want to do everything, he can, because it belongs to him. Okay. Islamically, the true beneficial owner is the person you've given it to. Right? So as long as you understand what the Islamic law position is, and you needed to save a bit of duty and so on, which can be quite high.
Quite hefty.
That'd be a...
Aslam makes a very important point there with regards to gifting. A gift from an Islamic perspective is not deemed fulfilled and complete until there's a change of possession. So you actually hand control of that particular asset over to the recipient or the donee. So this is something that is important to keep in mind, that you cannot make a gift is not an intention. It is an offer to gift and an acceptance and receiving actual control. And then if the son or whoever it is wants to leave the asset in the care and the usage of the parent, then there's no problem with that. But the important point is the handing over and the possession part. And again, there can be complications here, so advice should be sought from the relevant experts.
Oh, fantastic. Unfortunately, we've reached the end of our show. Quickly, parting comments, and Aslam, I think there's some upcoming events that Al Baraka and Amal are hosting, so let's just go around the table. Fatima, you've been extremely quiet. Please give us some parting comments. What's your take on National Wolves Week? Okay, we'll come back to you, Aslam.
Okay, we've as part of the Wolves Week, we're having pre-Jummah lectures on Friday, 23rd October at Sparks Road Masjid and at Unit 10, Woodhurst, Chatsworth.
Okay.
There's a broadcast on ITV on Friday, 23rd October, that's between 8:30 and 9:30 p.m. And then the webinar with the keynote speaker, Shoaib Umar, on Saturday, 24th October, from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m.
Fantastic. Shoaib Umar, a well-known figure in our community and very well-versed on this topic, so that should be extremely interesting. Mulana, from Al Baraka side, if anyone wants to take Al Baraka up on their free advice on the drawing up of a simple will, is there any contact details that you can provide?
Yes, the bank is offering free consults and free wills. So the contact number to arrange this is the bank's customer services number, which is 0860 225 786. 0860 225 786. And I'd just like to close off with this comment, making reference to the hadith that was mentioned right at the beginning, where Rasulullah SAW encouraged us to not let 2 nights pass without preparing our will. So this is the time. The advice is free, the will is free. So all our listeners should ensure that this particular issue is taken care of during this Wills Week.
Absolutely, no excuses. Fatima, circling back to you, if people want to take Amal up on their offer for free wills and consultations, any contact details?
Yes, so if anyone has any questions or want to contact any of the Amal members, they can contact Amal on 031 207 3381.
Can you just repeat that for us?
207 3381.
Fantastic. From my side, I think it's been a really fascinating program. There's so many more questions that I have and want to ask. I am definitely going to take Amal or Al Baraka up on the advice and seek out a consultation. Shukran to all of you for being in the studio tonight. I think it's everyone should gain or should go and consult their relevant mufti and attorney for the legal and Sharia consultations and put a will in place. It's absolutely necessary in order to avoid disputes, family disputes after death. And that being said, we're way over time. Thank you for tuning in, and we look forward to seeing you next week. From the Business Matters team, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Audio stream across the world on radioalansar.co.za.
Making news, these are the twins.
Radio Al-Ansar. An informative Islamic global perspective. This is Al-Ansar News.
of October, the news from Durban 90.4 FM and Pietermaritzburg 105.6 FM. Municipal Workers Union to challenge dismissal of workers. Good evening, I'm Eric Kimonina.